Senator Mackenzie.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to return to... I know we asked a lot about PMO conversations, but there's been no contact by DFAT or the Foreign Minister's Office regarding the incident at Qatar with Minister Watt's documents, Mr Betts?
I'm not aware of any contact. I wasn't aware of the story until he brought it to our attention.
So, and just Ms Purvis-Smith on some of our earlier evidence, and forgive me if you've already given it a year ago or in October, but we know from previous investigations that DFAT did provide advice to your minister on the drafting of her letter to the government of Qatar. We spoke about in the bilateral services inquiry. What date did the minister request that advice?
I would have to take that on notice, Senator. But I can take it on notice for you if you like. I don't have that with me.
Okay. And when the advice was received back from DFAT?
I'll take that on notice, Senator.
And again, what date that letter from the minister was sent to the Qatari government?
Yes, Senator. I think that might have been in our previous testimony.
It might have been, but I
year.
just would like it. I was hoping you'd have it here with me.
I don't, but I can take that on notice. Given we've provided it at our previous testimony, it should be fairly easy.
Thank you. I just have some questions about Rex Airlines. When did the department first become aware of the financial circumstances surrounding Rex going into administration?
Yes, Senator. The department, on the day before we found out that it was being placed in a trading halt, on the day it was placed in a trading halt, on the 29th of July.
So when did you find out they were having difficulties with the books?
On that day, I rang the Rex's non-executive chairman, Mr Sharp, to see whether there was anything he could tell me, noting that he was chair of a listed company. He mentioned to me that he was legally constrained in what information he could share with me, but he suggested that he would set up a time at a later stage to try to tell me when he could. The next day, we had several briefings with Rex. My First Assistant Secretary, Ms Werner, attended a briefing with CASA that was held by Rex, led by the CEO of Rex, Mr Neville Howe, that went through that the airline may go into voluntary administration, and I had a phone call with Mr Sharp later that morning to discuss whether an administrator had been appointed, and he alerted me that the board may make a decision to put the business into voluntary administration.
So just remind me of the date of that timeline.
That's the 30th of July, Tuesday.
So you had that conversation on the Tuesday?
That's correct.
My question was actually, when did you first become aware of the financial issues with Rex? That's the conversation you had with the non-executive chairman. When did the department
I had a conversation
aware?
with the non-executive chairman the day before,
So
after
the 29th?
The 29th, after the company went into an ASX trading halt. I rang Mr Sharp to see if there was anything he could tell me.
So you've been very forthcoming in what action you took out after the ASX trading halt. My question is, these are stakeholders you're all in close contact with all the time, particularly the three airlines. When did you first become aware of the difficulties with Rex financially? Was it on the 29th of July?
On the 29th of July, Senator.
Okay.
We, as you know, we do reach out and engage with Rex on a regular basis. We noticed a few weeks earlier that there was an extraordinary general meeting ASX announcement to consider the removal of the RRAT directors, and so we were monitoring, but given it was an ASX listed company, there is limited amount that they could tell us. So we were monitoring as much as we could from public information. There was not much public information.
And no back channels.
Sorry?
And no back channels.
I go through Mr Sharp, and he, as on the 29th, he said that he was legally constrained.
Okay. Did anyone brief the Minister or her office regarding RRATs going into administration?
Yes, we did.
When did you brief the Minister?
There was a brief on Tuesday, the 30th of July, as soon as we were aware and given an indication that they may be going into administration. They went into administration around 9:30 on Tuesday evening, and we briefed the Minister and Minister's office as soon as we were made aware that that was a possibility that morning.
Yep, that morning, the morning of the 30th.
The 30th.
Great, thank you. What assistance has the government offered the administrators?
We meet with the administrators on a daily basis,
Right.
Senator. At the moment, that's 6 days a week.
Yep.
So the government has provided a government guarantee on tickets.
Yep.
The Minister has also waived the slot, use it or lose it arrangement for the next season for Rex.
Okay. Can I just ask, the ticket guarantee took a couple of weeks to actually be public, and maybe the brand damage may have occurred. In your brief to the Minister on the 30th of July about Rex going into administration, did that include some options for...
There's been quite a few briefs to the Minister since they went into administration. I would have to refresh my memory. Things were moving very quickly, as you might imagine, Senator. So we were briefing both in written form and in verbally, and at the beginning multiple times a day, as we were receiving information from the administrator. At that stage, it was very early. There was not a formal request until later.
When you say later, when was that?
On the 1st of August, Mr Sharp contacted me to raise concerns about a perceived lack of public confidence to book with Rex. So we started to work on what potential solution might be from that day forward.
And so the ticket guarantee came out of that process?
Yes, I believe it did. Given that this was moving on a
No, I
daily
appreciate
basis.
it, but you'll have your timelines there. So so was it just the ticket guarantee that was one of the options? What about an equity stake? When was that floated with the Minister?
I don't know that I can tell you what options have been floated with the Minister and with the government at this stage. The government has said that all options are on the table, and so we are working closely with the administrator. Something that we have to be mindful of, Senator, is the duties of the administrator throughout this process. The government, neither the government nor the department can take decisions of or for the administrator. So all decisions would go through normal cabinet processes of government, but also need to be made by and agreed to by the administrator so that they don't contravene their duties under the Corporations Act.
Yeah. So what was the timeline between the Minister being given the option of the ticket guarantee and the announcement? So Rex raises that on the 1st of August.
Raised it.
But when was it announced that the government would be...
The announcement was on the 15th of August, Senator.
Yep, so 2 weeks later. And I'm trying to ascertain when the decision was made.
So that there were decisions were made through normal cabinet processes via ERC and briefs to the minister, and then through ERC. One of the things that we needed to do, Senator, was work with the administrator, because it needed to take into account the commercial arrangements between Rex and the administrator's relationship with their merchants, which we were not privy to. And I don't want to disclose any commercial in confidence arrangements between Rex and their merchants, but that did change. The administrator was talking to their merchants on a daily basis, and those arrangements and commercial arrangements were moving, and so we needed to settle the guarantee, the terms of the guarantee, to take into account the commercial arrangements that the administrators and Rex had, which included what the merchants were going to be doing.
Okay. So what timelines are in place at the moment?
In terms
of how timelines for the administrators to sort of land this?
The administrators have current convening period is through to the 25th of November, Senator.
Do you think they'll be... and you're talking with them every single day, so they've got another month. Are they confident?
We are working closely with the administrator, Senator, with a view to...
With more options, all the options on the table?
All options on the table, with a view to securing the best possible outcome for Rex.
Has the department been requested, or has it provided advice to the Minister regarding financial assistance to passengers, workers or contractors?
The airline is still operating, and the guarantee was designed to provide confidence to consumers.
That's not my
to
question.
Purchase. If you're referring to employees who have been made redundant?
I'm asking if the department has been requested, or have you provided advice for assistance for contractors, for staff and for customers who've been, detrimentally affected?
So
it's a simple question about, have you been requested to provide that advice? Or I don't want to go to the details. Have you been requested to provide that advice, or have you provided advice around those three issues?
I think I can say we've provided advice on impact on and the circumstances of employees. We've provided advice on customers, because there was an arrangement that Rex had organised and Virgin had offered to rebook customers who were on the 737 business, who stopped flying. And in terms of customers, the government guarantee was designed in terms of customers to provide assurance to customers to be able, and consumers, to continue to fly, so that they would be able to get refunds in circumstances where they were eligible.
And contractors? Only workers and...
I'm not sure we went into that level of detail of working out employees versus contractors.
But were you requested to look
to that level of detail?
Can you clarify what you mean by contractors in that context?
Well, contractors that work for Rex, that are impacted by Rex going into administration.
So individuals who are not employees but are
directly
under
employees,
service
yes.
agreements with,
yeah.
So we work through...
The traditional definition of a contractor.
It could be a supply contractor, it could be an individual. Yeah.
Well, that's true.
So we work through DUA, who have responsibility for the Fair Entitlements Guarantee, and they also have their own relationship with the administrator to go through the impact on employees.
But not contractors.
I'm not sure.
Could you clarify
I can
for me?
clarify.
And I want to know if you've been requested to look at contractors. Has there been any contemplation on providing direct financial assistance to keep regional services operating?
As I mentioned, I can't go through exactly what the options are.
In generality?
Even in generality, Senator. And the reason is that it is not just the government's decision, because it is also the administrator's decision.
But my question then, Ms Purvis-Smith, is there a contingency plan in place? And I respect and understand you can't go to the details of that. That's a matter for government. But is there a contingency plan in place for RREX, for regional service provision?
So what I can say is that we are working with the administrator to get to a point and to get the best possible outcome for RREX going forward. All options are on the table. We are working very closely with the administrator.
So in terms of regional communities, I understand you're focused on RREX as an airline, but what comfort or consideration do regional communities have in this situation?
We are focused on RREX because regional connectivity is important in Australia, and RREX is one of the largest airlines that provide regional connectivity.
I appreciate that. What assurance can the department provide regional communities that they will maintain that connectivity if RREX is sold?
That's the priority of the government, is ensuring that those regional communities are continued to be served by airlines. I understand how important that is. I've travelled to many places around the country where RREX are the only ones who fly there, in many states, and that remains the priority of the government. That's why the flights that have been guaranteed have been those regional routes.
But it was a bit late. But anyway, what support's been given to regional airports who are also suffering as a result of this?
So regional airports will be a creditor up until they go into the voluntary administration process. There is a voluntary administration process that they need to follow. The voluntary administration process, one of those things is to go through an adjudication process with all of the creditors. They are still going through that process. The administrator has said and has been paying bills throughout the administration process, but recognising that there are creditors for up until the day that they went into voluntary administration, and the councils with the airports are some of those creditors.
So landing fees, etc., whilst they're in administration, are still being paid?
That's correct.
To regional airports?
That's correct.
Okay, and just finally, how much money to date has been spent to support RREX through administration?
In terms of the guarantee has not been drawn down, has not been required. That is a good thing. That means that confidence is holding up for people to book with RREX and with RREX Airlines, and that is the design of the guarantee. That's what the guarantee is for, as well as the slots which RREX also asked for.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Mackenzie. Senator Canavan.
I've got some more questions on outcome 2, I think, if it's relevant. Just checking electric vehicle strategy. That's in this outcome, is that right?
It is, Senator.
In the new vehicle efficiency scheme.
Yeah, we might get onto that. But just to start with, I'm referring to a report. Sorry, just bring it back up. National Vehicle Electric Strategy. Now, this is a Department of Climate Change report, but it is linked to on your website. And I'm just trying to get a handle on the projections for EV sales. Do you do that? Do you track those at all yourselves?
Tristan Cathage, Assistant Secretary, Reducing Surface Transport Emissions Branch. Sorry, Senator, just to check you, I don't think I quite heard your question. If you wouldn't mind
Do
repeating.
you track the projections of current data and projections for EV sales?
We do. We have a research a group of people researching.
Yeah, okay.
So we do keep tabs on those. Yeah.
Okay. What's happening with them at the moment?
One moment, Senator. So the information that I have at the moment is that in 2023, EVs represented 8.45% of new light vehicle sales in Australia, which was an increase from 3.8% in 2022. I'd have to check if we have any numbers that relate to 2024.
Okay. In this report I mentioned there's a figure for April 2024. It seems to have just ticked over 9% share. But I suppose that your figures and these show somewhat of a plateauing perhaps, and they're still increasing but not surging. My understanding is that had your department, I'd read before, had your department predicted that EV sales would be 27% of Australian car sales by 2030?
So we did have a projection, I believe, in our impact analysis for the new vehicle efficiency standard, Senator.
Right.
I believe, can't confirm the 27% figure, but we can, hopefully we can provide you the reference. Oh, actually, I have it here. If you're familiar with the impact assessment, it's figure 8 on page 31.
It's been a while. What's the figure then? Or what I mean,
it's a graph that shows what we think the BAU, the business as usual, EV uptake is. With no
is that as percentage of new car sales?
Yes, that's correct.
So roughly in 2030, what does it?
I don't have
show?
Numbers on this graph, Senator.
But you
so
could probably estimate.
It's between 20 and 30 on the graph that I have in front of me by 2030. So
okay, so not perhaps around the range I mentioned.
If I might add as well, you might be referring to a 2019 BITRA report that produced those figures. So we did have previous research released by BITRA that indicated Australia would reach 8% by 2025 and 27% by 2030.
Right. Okay. Obviously, the new government had they'd previously, in their Reputex modelling, forecast 89% of new car sales in 2030 would be through electric vehicles. Does the department expect we'll get to anywhere close to 89% by 2030?
I haven't seen that modelling you're referring to, Senator.
It's been widely reported. It was part of their carbon emissions reduction plan. Well, maybe I'll ask the Minister, do you still stand behind that Reputex modelling?
I'm not aware of
okay. I think the Minister has backed away from it. So it seems to me obviously the 90% is not going to happen, but even the 27 or somewhere between 20 and 30 is starting to look a little hard to get to. Are there any more projections or updating given the new data showing this plateauing of sales?
We wouldn't want to speculate, Senator, on what might happen in the future.
So you're not going to update the projections at all?
In the impact analysis, it wouldn't be normal for the department to update its impact analyses on decisions that have already been made.
Won't this have an impact, though, on the new vehicle efficiency scheme, the uptake of EVs? If there's fewer uptake of EVs, the costs of complying with NVES will be higher for
Senator,
Australians?
what I would say is there is a provision in the NVES Act that requires a review of the NVES Act to be undertaken, and as part of that, of course, the department would look at the broader context of the light vehicle market and what's happening in that market.
So it sounds like just months after legislation passed, the government has to reconsider the NVES scheme now because people aren't buying EVs as quickly as possible, as was projected? That's what you just indicated, that we're going to look at this.
Mechanisms built into the legislation.
Right.
I believe Mr Cathage was referencing the review mechanism, and that is in the legislation already, and that the department would review the NVES at that time and take into account any changes that has happened up until that time.
Just to confirm my point, though, under this scheme, given the sort of hard caps of emissions targets that are needed, the fewer Australians buying electric vehicles means that there will be a higher cost then for other vehicles to have to pay to get to an average baseline level. Is that right?
I might add, Senator, that, and we've discussed this previously, that there are a range of ways...
For those listening online, if the people don't provide a clear answer to a clear question, it means that the answer is yes.
That's
But
right.
go on, Ms Stagg. Yes, well, I mean, it'd be nice.
You can add your commentary all you like.
It'd be great for them to shut officials down while they're trying to answer your
All right,
question.
okay, it'd be nice to get answers.
Well,
As we've discussed previously, there are a range of ways that the vehicle suppliers can meet their NVES obligations. So we don't set targets for particular engine types, so things like electric vehicles. Suppliers can adjust their vehicle mix using a range of different technologies, more efficient ICE engines, the uptake of hybrid vehicles as well as electric vehicles. So there are a range of ways they can adjust their vehicle fleet to meet their obligations.
Comes
But
back
not
to...
all of them can they? Because they don't have the range. So it will mean a reduction of choice available to Australians, won't it?
Well, it's necessarily built into that answer that people have to adjust. We've been this before, but people have to adjust the cars they buy. If they adjust the cars they sell, that means that people are adjusting the cars they buy.
Well, typically
and Australians won't have free choice anymore in what car they drive.
Typically we see a greater range of choice for consumers rather than a reduction, because there is an incentive to provide a greater range of efficient vehicles into the market, including variants of vehicles that are offered in other markets that are more efficient than the equivalent vehicle in Australia.
So what about, offerings from vehicle manufacturers such as Isuzu or Mazda that do not have the breadth of range offerings to offset the government's tax will end up exiting the market because they can't actually do what you're saying they all can do, because only those with quite a broad range of offerings to the public can avail themselves of the mix and match.
Senator, what we've seen occur in other markets is that vehicle suppliers
please don't go to the
adjust
European
their,
stuff that you were talking about last time.
They adjust their lineup, and as Ms Stagg has indicated, they adjust their the vehicles that they provide to the public to make them more efficient, including, for example...
This is because you based this on Europe, didn't you? Anyway,
Senator,
I'll butt out. You're going beautifully.
So, Chair, we're being asked questions and then heckled during the giving of the answers by the person asking the question. Can you help us here?
Yes, I certainly can. Sorry, I was wrapped up in reading about Indigenous training in the trucking industry because I'd switched off. I better switch back on. To take up the point, yes, if you are, we've said this many times, if you can ask the question, at least let the officers answer without the interjections. So, who had the call?
Well, look, I think I'm finished. I mean, the good news for Australians, they do have a choice. They'll have a choice in the next election, whether they want to have a government that restricts their car choice or not. Senator, I'm happy with
no
this.
tax on our utes, SUVs or four-wheel drives.
We'll
Come
see.
on,
We'll see what happens.
Well,
Okay, on that note...
I know what they drive in
do I take
regional
it-
Tasmania.
Excuse me.
Carol.
On
not
that, do
EVs.
I take that we finished the outcome team?
No, on 15th of August 2024, the opposition wrote to Minister King seeking advice as to why the department had denied registration on the RAV, Register of Approved Vehicles, for a fuel-efficient key car, KEI, which had previously been granted with import approval. Why has the minister failed to respond to this correspondence?
So we will get the relevant officials to the table.
So sorry.
Senator Nita Langford, First Assistant Secretary, Road and Vehicle Safety Division. Could you repeat the question? It was about correspondence.
It was. The opposition wrote to Minister King seeking advice as to why the department had denied registration on the RAV, the Register of Approved Vehicles, for a fuel-efficient key car, KEI, which had previously been granted import approval. And I'm wanting to know why the minister has failed to reply to the correspondence. I think it's Honda, a Honda vehicle.
Okay.
Senator, Jessica Hall, Deputy Secretary. I believe that a draft is currently with the circulating between us and the office and will be finalised shortly.
So is there a reason? How long has this been going on for? What date did the department provide the first draft response?
I'd have to come back to you on that, Senator. I don't have that in front of me at the moment.
So my understanding is that the matter has been raised by representatives of the Australian Imported Motor Vehicle Industry Association. The vessel transporting the vehicle, the Honda N1 key car from Japan. The vehicle arrived in Australia in May 24, cleared customs in June 24 to be delivered to a registered automotive workshop. When the registered automotive workshop attempted to lodge the necessary compliance documentation to register the vehicle, the department advised the model report had been suspended and refused the registration. Is that correct?
So I'll get Ms Mulcharik to answer those questions for you, Senator.
Amanda Milzarek, Acting Assistant Secretary of Vehicle Safety Operations. So the vehicle did receive an initial approval under the importation.
Yep.
When it arrived in Australia, the model reports were suspended. This was as a result of a tip-off that we received. The department did an investigation into a range of model reports related to these vehicles. When we asked the model
tip-off.
So someone has reported to us that they're non-compliant with Australian standards.
Right.
Yep. So as part of our investigation, we went back to the approval holders of these model reports, asking them to provide us evidence of compliance with the certain standard. These model report authors or approval holders were unable to provide this to us. So they receive, I guess, an intention of suspension notice where they're given time to respond to the department in writing. The authors that didn't provide the responses in writing were then suspended.
Okay, so when did the department first discover that vehicle under 1.5 metre width wouldn't comply with the Australian standard, as I understand it, is ADR 84?
Yeah. So for that, I'm aware of the vehicle you're talking about.
Yep.
For that one, I would have to come back to you with the date. So when we're informed, the particular owner of the vehicle has lodged an appeal against the decision, and it's currently going through the Administrative Review Tribunal.
So how long does the department's service charter allow for assessing a model report?
Assessing a model report is 60 business days.
And how long has this been going for?
So the model report was already assessed and approved.
Yeah.
And it's now suspended. So
because you got a tip-off?
No, because the approval holders were unable to provide evidence when asked by the department.
So when did you, and you don't know when you first discovered, when did you get the tip-off? When did you verify the tip-off? Or you're just...
So in 30th of September, the department, as at the 30th of September, we've suspended 12 model reports in total that related to these K cars.
Right, so you said they could come in and no one bothered checking about the standard that these cars weren't compliant with, according to the tip-off.
So the regulatory framework, Senator, is a risk-led one where the applicants make declarations to us that they comply with the legislation, and Amanda's team assesses those declarations. And on this occasion, the tip-off led them to investigate those declarations, and they found that some of them had been made without the necessary evidence, and so they suspended the reports.
Okay, so how many affected vehicles have been issued an import approval and were halfway through the importation process when their model reports were suspended?
So, of the 12 model reports suspended, 134 vehicles supplied under those model reports are on the register of approved vehicles. And, sorry, I don't have the... Have you got that number in front of you?
Probably would have to take it on notice to get the exact numbers, but I am aware there is a couple of vehicles that were, like, if you're talking about, were in transit on their way here.
I'm trying to work out that the import approval, you've suspended them, but the import approval was provided, so they're going through the process. I don't know whether, and you've suspended them, and you think it's only a couple.
We've suspended the model reports, so the import approval is a different approval. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm trying to work out how many were approved and suspended subsequently. What's the total number? I'll ask these questions on notice.
Okay.
Affected constituents have argued the department should have made allowance for these vehicles that were halfway over on their way at the time of the decision, that these vehicles have been imported under initial approvals from the government only to find they were no longer valid. What steps are you taking to ensure that this doesn't happen again? Have you changed anything?
So, as I mentioned before, Senator, the onus is on the model report author to ensure that what they declare to us is correct. We do work closely with them. This particular design rule is designed to reduce the risk of serious and fatal injury and side impact crashes. So that also affects how we treat them. Sometimes there are things that we call minor and inconsequentials where we can waive some requirements. But in this case, because it was to do with side impact protection, the safety imperative was such that we needed to treat it this way. But Amanda and her team has been working closely with the model report authors to bring some, and she was able with her team to bring some of them into compliance, and so that those vehicles were able to be supplied, but where they weren't able to bring it into compliance, we've had to take the action we have for safety reasons.
Okay. I think that's...
You done?
Yep.
Just have a couple of questions on rail safety. Is that in the right area? Level railway crossings. Now, I just wanted to ask some questions about a draft code of practice, level crossings and train visibility. You're aware of that? Apparently it was out for public comment earlier this year. Just some quick questions. I'll try and get through this quickly. Are trains exempt from illumination requirements under this code? Or a particular, I've got here ATA illumination. I don't know what ATA stands for.
Senator Sally Todd, Assistant Secretary of Land Transport Policy Branch. The Code of Practice, ITEM, Infrastructure and Transport Ministers, tasked the Office of the Rail Safety, the National Rail Safety Regulator, to develop the Code of Practice. It's a voluntary code, and it includes, it builds on the the RISB lighting standard and adds some additional holistic risk management approaches, such as hazards impacting visibility, human factor considerations around specific crossings, use of common safety control measures, and relationships between rail operators and road managers.
Okay, so just going back to this question about illumination, do all trains need to be illuminated under the code?
The code has different illumination requirements depending on the level of risk. All trains have standard headlights, which research says provides the best luminance, and the code of practice provides that other types of lights, for example, beacon lights, can provide greater luminance if, for example, you can't use the headlights on the train in built-up areas, etc.
I suppose my questions are particularly about other people being able to see the train. That's the sort of concern here. So not so much the headlamps, I suppose, but lighting on the side, etc., that you'd normally see on large trucks, etc. So do trains that are compliant with this voluntary code have to have that type of lighting?
Yes.
On it, they do?
Yes, the research undertaken to inform the code is testing luminance, which is around how, the distinction between the train and its background, basically.
Okay, so they have to do that. All right, okay. Yep.
The code is voluntary, so it's not that it's mandated.
Yep.
However, helpfully, under Section 250 of the Rail Safety National Law, it does enable operators who comply with the code of practice to use that as evidence in court proceedings. So it creates quite a strong incentive for rail operators to comply with the voluntary code, given it's a way for them to discharge their safety obligations. And a number of the major rail freight operators have already publicly stated their intention to comply with the code.
Okay. So do we have an idea about how many trains do comply with this? Or what proportion of the industry complies with this code or will comply with this code once it's in place?
Senator, the voluntary code of practice is currently with Infrastructure and Transport Ministers for voting. Assuming it's agreed, it will then come into force about a month after that.
Okay. All right. I think I've found that the Australian Trucking Association, I think, is keen to see illumination on all trains. So you're aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Have you responded to them or engaged with them about their issues?
The Australian Trucking Association has recently been added to the National Level Crossing Steering Committee, so they've got a seat at the table, and a key part of the steering committee's work is around level crossing safety, including the code of practice. So, yes.
Okay. Do trucks need to have illumination on the side of their vehicles under law?
Presumably, but that's...
We'd have to...
Yes.
That's be a separate law.
National Heavy Vehicle Regulator.
I think I'm told they have to, but so their sort of issue is, well, if we have to, why don't the trains have to? Okay. Now, apparently, is it true under this code that only a single headlight on the front of the train is enough to comply with the code?
Yes, bear with me, yes. The code, as I said, it does mandate the use of headlights, either halogen or LED. Depending on the risk profile of the operator, the code also includes the use of beacon lighting, as I said earlier, and the use of side lighting is also in the code of practice.
I'm just asking, if you just have a single headlight at the front, is that enough to comply as a train?
It depends on the risk profile of that particular operator.
Okay, so is the risk profile something that's self-assessed?
It's self-assessed, but it will be on the basis of guidance from the Office of the National Rail Safety Regulator.
So we have a co-regulatory model for rail safety where operators develop their safety management systems and work with the Office of the National Rail Safety Regulator to demonstrate that they meet their safety obligations.
Okay.
So I've met with, Lara Jensen, who lost a family member as a result of this. This is a huge issue in Western Australia, and Senator Canavan and my colleague Mayor Davies has been a strong proponent of action on this. Senator Canavan's questions are incredibly pertinent because if a singular light on the locomotive is all that's required in some of these trains, particularly in remote areas, can be very, very long. And it is a significant amount of time between the locomotive passing through a crossing and the actual obstruction to motorists in the dark or the fog still being there. So I'm wanting to understand, the decision is before ministers. When will they make a decision on this?
That's a decision we can't preempt.
Is it coming up for the next Transport Ministers meeting? Is it on the agenda?
It's with ministers at the moment for decision.
For decision. And
yes.
how long? When was it? How long has it been before ministers for decision?
My recollection was it was provided to them in October.
October 24?
Yes, so recently.
Okay. Now, the officials meeting that you have before the ministers meeting, have all officials signed off on this?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
So there really is no excuse for ministers if all their secretaries have agreed.
Well, that's a decision for ministers.
Yeah, of course it is. So what have officials agreed, specifically?
I don't know that I have all of the detail of the code in front of me. As Ms Todd has outlined, it's around headlights, beacon lights and side lights. I don't have the specific detail. The code's actually managed by the Office of the National Rail Safety Regulator as the lead agency. So there may be some of this detail that we need to take on notice to consult with them and obtain that further detail you're looking for.
Okay, well, I might just run through some questions that I know the community group that I've been speaking with would like me to ask.
Certainly.
And so I think it's important, given their advocacy, that we pay them respect. So in respect to unused railway lines, crossings, during audits inspection of the railway system across Australia, who has the final sign-off on disused rail infrastructure?
I'd have to take that on notice.
Once the sign-off has been completed, how long does it take to have the rail line removed, signs removed, rail crossing disbanded?
I'd have to take that on notice.
That will vary by who the rail manager is and the arrangements in place jurisdiction by jurisdiction, and will also, obviously, in the latter case, depend on the complexity of the engineering works involved.
So why are trains exempt from the ATA illumination compliant requirements?
So the ATA has been lobbying a position for lighting, but there is no ATA compliance requirement of trains. So I think there's their sort of publicly stated position for what they would like to see happening. But I wouldn't say that anyone's exempt from those because they are not actually a requirement of the industry.
So the code of practice we're talking about has been developed by the Office of the National Office of the Rail Safety Regulator, whose job it is under rail safety legislation to make sure that risks of the kind that have been legitimately identified are mitigated so far as reasonably practicable. So we've got an independent statutory regulator that's been driving the consultation and the development of the code.
Are you able to answer questions about train visibility at all?
To some extent, but ultimately the Rail Safety Regulator is the lead agency for this.
No, I appreciate they're the lead agency. I also appreciate that you are experts in this field for the department.
Yes, so
yeah, I'm not expecting you to be the lead. I'm
assist.
expecting you to know stuff about this.
Yes.
For us.
Yes.
Thank you. That's just checking. So in terms of an average road user, do we have data around how you can estimate the distance between to a train or estimate the speed of the train? Is there able to identify the objective as a train as opposed and distinguished from other objects? Is there sort of data available to the human eye's ability to do that?
So I believe the regulator has that information and it's quite context dependent. So things like the availability of the sight line, it really depends site by site at level crossings. So there are sort of different data sets, so things like the National Level Crossing Safety Portal, where we're trying to collect data that is specific to each level crossing so that when we take risk mitigations at a level crossing, it is specific to that site. So it may be that in some cases it's about signage, the use of rumble strips and things to draw a driver's attention. In other cases, it may be that it's a very visible level crossing, but the issue is around the sight lines, the curvature of the road, the intersection with the level crossing. So it really is very dependent on each individual site.
So given it is so contextualised, the need for an agreed visibility code on trains, other than just a light at the front, would seem a sensible way to ensure that motorists can see a train once the locomotive has gone past.
Lighting is one aspect of it. I would note that the majority of accidents actually occur during the daytime, so 74%, I believe, of fatalities and 81%.
And there's many countries around the world that make motorists drive during the day with their lights on. Like, that's not an excuse not to light the carriages.
No, what I'm saying is there's a range of safety
I
factors
know,
that
but I would
contribute
hate
to
to that to
accidents.
be interpreted that way. In terms of the WA Coroner's Report recommendation, are you able to explain why that WA Coroner's Report from 2001 has not been accepted, acted on, or changes made to prevent further fatalities? I mean, that's 2001. Here we are at 2024. Is there...
I can't comment on why predecessors may not have taken action in relation to that. It has been information that has been relevant in things like the new National Level Crossing Safety Strategy and the current Regional Australia Level Crossing Safety Program. For example, we've taken lessons around the importance of conducting research and trials on prospective technologies that are applicable in regional contexts in particular, where it may be cost prohibitive to make a level crossing an active safety. So we're looking at alternative options that would be effective in remote and regional locations in particular. So we are taking the lessons from that, but I think the families are right to be frustrated that there was not action sooner.
Yep. But from what you're telling me, officials have made an agreed position, which does or doesn't... Does it include lighting on carriages?
It does include side lighting. I don't know that it goes as far at this stage to do the lighting down the carriages. There are still trials underway, for example, use of reflective paints rather than lighting. There are issues, for example, on some of these trains with the locations they operate in that dust becomes problematic and it reduces the effectiveness. So the idea of the research that's being undertaken in relation to these is to ensure that if we're going to recommend or require a change to lighting, that it is actually effective and that cost delivers a benefit to road users. So these initial steps that we've outlined are off the back of trials that showed they had some benefits in certain conditions. It's not across the board. It's not a silver bullet, essentially, but we are continuing to look at other options around lighting, and as those are proven, the intention is for RISB to continue to amend that standard to highlight those additional effective technologies.
So the code of practice that's before ministers
takes account of everything we have at the moment in terms of technology that's...
Will it be mandatory for all rail operators, or is it a is it a compulsory code?
No, as I've outlined, it's a voluntary code of practice, but that can be used in proceedings within the court system, which creates an incentive, and Pacific National and Horizon have already announced that they intend to comply with the code.
I'll have a lot of questions on notice.
Thank you, Senator.
That's outcome 2 done? Okay, great.